The grand hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than the eyes could see. Pillars of crystal light rose toward the ceiling, glowing in many colors. Voices from dozens of alien species echoed across the chamber, each voice layered with centuries of pride and authority. To many, this hall was the heart of the galaxy, a place where the greatest powers decided the fate of the weak. On this day, the Thalren stood at the center. They were a small people, thin and fragile, their skin pale, blue, their bodies built more for survival than for battle. Their leader, Elder Varen, held a trembling staff. His voice shook, but his courage pushed him to speak. "We beg the council," he said, bowing his head. "Our world is dying. The storms grow worse every season, the soil no longer gives food, and our children grow weaker each day. We have no armies, no treasures, but we ask for mercy. Please, let us join the council, so we may find allies and survive." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, one by one, the great empires answered. The massive Kroll Dominion spoke first, their ambassador towering over the hall, scales shining like polished stone. "The council cannot waste resources on the weak," he said with a cold growl. "The galaxy is built by strength. The Thalren bring nothing. They are unfit." Next came the merchant lords of the Fixari, their robes woven with jewels. "The Thalren cannot pay. They have no trade, no metals, no value. A council seat is not charity, it is business. We decline." The room murmured. The Thalren lowered their eyes. Elder Varen's staff shook harder, but he tried again. "We will work. We will give what little we can. If you share your wisdom, your science, we may learn, and someday repay your kindness." But the great empires only laughed, their voices sharp. The representatives of the Zorath Empire leaned forward, their golden armor glinting. "Repay? You have nothing, and you will always have nothing. The council does not carry beggars on its back." The Thalren delegation fell into silence. Shame burned through them. They had known the answer might be cruel, but to hear it spoken before all the stars broke their hearts. Some whispered prayers, some held back tears. They had traveled across the galaxy to find mercy, and found only rejection. Elder Varen turned to leave. His people began to walk out of the great circle, their heads bowed. The council had already moved on to new business, debates about trade routes, warships, and borders. To them, the Thalren were nothing more than shadows fading away. But then, a single voice broke the noise. Wait. It was not loud, but it was firm. The sound came from a smaller seat near the far edge of the circle. It was not one of the ancient empires, not a voice backed by centuries of power. It was a human envoy, standing among those who were often ignored. The envoy stepped forward. His name was Daniel Hayes, though few in the chamber knew or cared. He was tall for a human, but compared to the Kroll or the Zorath, he looked almost ordinary. No shining armor, no glittering robes, only a simple dark suit with a small earth insignia pinned at the chest. He looked at the Thalren, then at the council. "If no one else will help," he said, his voice steady, "then humanity will." Room froze. Every alien eye turned toward him. Some blinked in confusion, others in annoyance. The ambassador of the Kroll let out a low laugh. "Humans? You dare speak in this hall?" Daniel did not flinch. "We may not be old in this council," he said. "We may not have fleets as large as yours or trade routes across every star, but we know what it means to suffer. We know what it means to be ignored, and we will not turn our backs on the Thalren." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Fixari whispered to one another, calling it foolishness. The Zorath glared, their golden eyes cold. But among the Thalren, hope flickered like a fragile flame. Elder Varen lifted his gaze. His voice, weak but clear, trembled as he asked, You would do this? You would take us in when no one else will?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, we cannot offer everything, but we can offer food, medicine, and protection. We can offer friendship, and sometimes that is enough." The council erupted into noise. Some shouted in anger, some laughed in disbelief, some simply shook their heads. But Daniel Hayes stood firm, his shoulders straight, his eyes calm. He had spoken, and the words could not be taken back. For the Thalren, it was as if the weight of the galaxy had lifted. They were not alone anymore. Some strange, stubborn humans had chosen to stand beside them. As the Thalren delegation followed Daniel out of the council hall, they felt the sting of rejection still burning. But now, it was mixed with something else, a small, shining thread of hope. The journey to Earth was long. The Thalren ships were old, patched with whatever parts they could find. Many of their people were sick, and their supplies were almost gone. Yet when Earth's blue and white world appeared through the ship's windows, a quiet awe filled their hearts. It was beautiful, alive, green, and full of oceans that shimmered under the light. When they landed, they expected coldness. They expected suspicion or more rejection. But instead, the humans greeted them with open hands. Farmers from distant lands carried food to them. Engineers brought tools to repair their ships. Doctors stepped forward, scanning the sick and giving them medicine. The Thalren children laughed for the first time in years as they tasted sweet fruits from Earth's trees. The elders sat quietly, watching fields of grain stretch to the horizon, whispering that this must be a dream. Elder Varen stood beside Daniel Hayes, his staff no longer trembling. "I do not understand," he said softly. "Why? Why would you help us when the great powers of the galaxy would not?" Daniel looked out over the fields, his expression thoughtful. "Because we know what it means to be small. Once, humanity was ignored too. But we learned that kindness costs less than cruelty, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness changes everything." The Thalren leader lowered his head in gratitude. For the first time in his long life, he felt his people might survive. Not because of wealth, not because of strength, but because someone cared. Far above, hidden in the shadows of space, alien ships watched. The great empires did not understand this strange human choice. They whispered among themselves, mocking, plotting, waiting. To them, humans were reckless. To them, humans had made a dangerous mistake. But on Earth, under the warmth of the sun, the Thalren found something the galaxy had denied them: hope and a chance to live again. The Thalren ships hovered above Earth's atmosphere, their old metal hulls shaking from long travel. Many of the ships looked like they would break apart at any moment, patched with uneven panels and glowing with weak engines. From the windows, the Thalren stared at the blue and white world below. Oceans sparkled, clouds drifted lazily, and wide green continents stretched further than their eyes could measure. For a people whose home was dying, Earth looked like paradise. When they finally landed, it was not in secret military bases or guarded starports as they had imagined. The humans chose to welcome them in open fields, near wide rivers and golden farmlands. Long lines of vehicles arrived, not with soldiers but with farmers, doctors, builders, and curious families. They carried crates of food, water, and supplies. Children waved small flags as if greeting friends instead of strangers from the stars. The Thalren stepped down their ramps, thin bodies shaking with fear. Would these humans turn them away now that the council's eyes were not watching? But instead the humans smiled. A farmer with rough hands pressed a basket of bread into a Thalren mother's arms. A nurse gently lifted a weak Thalren child and gave her clean water to drink. Engineers walked around the broken ships, running their hands over the cracked engines with excitement. "You flew all the way here in this?" one engineer asked in disbelief, looking at the loose wires and melted panels. He shook his head and grinned. "Don't worry, we'll fix it. Might take time, but we'll fix it." The Thalren leader, Elder Varen, could hardly speak. His staff trembled as he looked around. I thought you would see us as a burden," he whispered. Daniel Hayes, the human envoy who had spoken for them at the council, stood at his side. "A burden?" Daniel smiled faintly. "No. You're guests now. And guests are welcome in our home. For the Thalren, these words were almost too much to believe. For years their voices had been drowned in rejection, yet here among humans they found open arms. Days passed and the Thalren slowly adjusted to Earth. At first they feared the sun would be too strong or the food too strange, but the humans worked patiently with them. Scientists studied their biology, ensuring medicines and meals were safe. Farmers set aside land where Thalren families could grow food of their own. The Thalren children were the first to laugh. They ran barefoot through grassy fields, chasing birds and splashing in rivers. They played with human children who taught them simple games, throwing balls, skipping ropes, and drawing pictures in the dirt. For a people whose homeworld had turned gray and barren, the colors of Earth felt like a dream. One evening, Elder Varen sat by a fire with Daniel Hayes. The Thalren elder watched as sparks rose into the sky, vanishing among the stars. His voice was quiet. "I do not understand your people," he said. "The others in the council called us worthless, yet you treat us with kindness. Why?" Daniel poked the fire gently with a stick. His eyes reflected the flames. "Because we remember," he said. "There was a time when humans struggled too. Long ago, our ancestors begged for help and were ignored. Sometimes they fought wars just to survive. We know what it feels like to be small, to be told you are not worth saving." Varen listened carefully. The wrinkles on his face deepened as he whispered, "So you help us because you remember your own pain?" Daniel shook his head. "No. We help because we remember our strength. We survived because others finally believed in us. Now it's our turn to believe in someone else." Elder closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt his people had a future. As weeks turned into months, humanity poured its effort into the Thalren settlement. Engineers from across Earth volunteered to repair the damaged ships. Young doctors studied Thalren biology, writing new textbooks so future students could understand. Farmers planted crops the Thalren could eat, experimenting until the right soil and seeds grew. One day, a group of children gathered around an old Thalren farmer who was trying to plant with shaky hands. The man was confused by Earth's soil. It was richer, softer, and full of life, unlike the dust he had known. A human boy crouched beside him, showing how to press the seeds gently, cover them, and pour water. The farmer blinked, then smiled as the boy patted the ground proudly. For the first time in years, the old man felt hope in the soil beneath his hands. The Thalren were not only receiving. Slowly, they began to give back. Some of their healers shared old herbal knowledge that surprised human doctors. Their small, energy cells, though weak by galactic standards, inspired young inventors to build cheaper, lighter tools. Musicians from the Thalren played haunting songs that echoed through human cities, drawing crowds who listened in silence. In return, humans shared stories. Around fires and in schools, they told the Thalren about Earth's long history, about times when humanity was divided, when hunger and disease nearly broke them, when powerful nations ignored the cries of the weak. The Thalren listened closely, recognizing themselves in these stories. Humanity had once been small, just like them, but had risen to stand tall. Yet not everyone celebrated. Far beyond Earth, in the shadow of the stars, the great empires whispered. The Zoreth Empire, proud and powerful, saw humanity's act as dangerous. They gathered in their golden halls sneering at the reports. "Humans think themselves saviors," one Zoreth lord spat, "but they are fools. To protect the weak is to weaken yourself." The Fixari merchants nodded. "It is bad for business. If kindness spreads, what need will there be for trade with us?" But still, Earth continued. And every report that spread across the galaxy carried the same shocking truth. The Thalren, once rejected, were alive again, because of humans. On Earth, life grew brighter for the Thalren. Children who had once been thin and sick now grew strong. Elders who had been ready to give up found reasons to live. Families who had lost hope rebuilt their homes with human help. One night, as the stars glowed above, Elder Varen stood before his people. The humans had built a stage for a festival, decorated with lights and music. Both humans and Thalren gathered together, laughing, eating, and dancing. Varen leaned on his staff and raised his voice. "My people," he said, "we once believed we were alone. We were told we had no value, no place among the stars, but tonight, we stand here because someone believed in us. Humanity did not see our weakness, they saw our worth, and because of them, we live." The crowd cheered, both Thalren and human, voices mixing as one. Daniel Hayes stood quietly at the edge, watching the joy spread. When someone asked him why he looked so thoughtful, he only answered with a small smile. "Because this is only the beginning." Above them, the stars burned bright. And though the great powers of the galaxy did not understand it, something had begun on Earth that could not be stopped. The bond between humanity and the rejected Thalren was growing stronger each day, and the galaxy was watching. The bond between humans and the Thalren grew stronger with every passing season. What began as an act of mercy had turned into something far greater, a partnership. The Thalren were no longer only guests, they were becoming neighbors, friends, and allies. But far beyond Earth, the galaxy whispered with unease. The great empires who once rejected the Thalren without thought, now watched the reports of this strange alliance. To them it was an insult. Humans, a young species barely recognized in the Council, had done what the mighty would not. And in doing so, humanity had made the great empires look weak, selfish, and cruel. In the halls of the Zorath Empire, anger grew like fire. The lords in golden armor gathered in a chamber lit by tall flames. Their voices rumbled with scorn. "These humans," one said, his eyes narrow, "do not understand how fragile they are. They stand against the natural order. The weak must remain weak, or the galaxy will fall to chaos." Another slammed his fist against the table. "If the humans continue, others will follow. Soon, every small race will beg them for protection. That cannot be allowed." From that moment, a shadow began to move across the stars. On Earth, life still felt bright. The Thalren worked beside humans, planting crops, building homes, and sharing knowledge. Yet Daniel Hayes noticed unease in the air. Reports arrived of strange encounters in space. Merchant ships delayed, human freighters searched without reason, Thalren scouts chased away from neutral sectors. At a meeting in a wide hall near the Thalren settlement, Daniel stood with Earth's leaders and Elder Varen. Maps floated as holograms above the table, showing routes where ships had vanished. "They're testing us," Daniel said firmly. "The Zorath and their allies are pressing, little by little. They want to see if we will break." Elder Varen gripped his staff tightly. His thin hands shook. "My people do not want war," he whispered. "We only wanted a place to live. If the Zorath strike us because of you, we will be wiped out." Daniel turned to him. His voice softened, but his eyes stayed steady. "And if you walk away now, do you think the Zorath will leave you alone? No. They rejected you because you were weak. But now you are with us. That means we fight together." The words settled over the room like heavy stones. Some Thalren nodded, in fear, others in resolve. They knew Daniel was right. The moment humanity chose to stand beside them, their fate was tied to Earth. Soon, the first direct warnings came. A message appeared on the Council network, glowing with the seal of the Zorath Empire. "To the humans of Earth, you are young. Do not overstep. Withdraw your support of the Thalren, and this will end. Continue, and you will pay the price." The message was shown in every human capital, on every news broadcast. Some people trembled, some shouted in anger, but most stood silent, waiting for the answer of their leaders. Daniel Hayes gave that answer at a press gathering. Standing before cameras, he spoke in the same calm voice he had used in the council chamber. "Humanity does not abandon those we call friends. The Thalren came to us in need, and we will not turn them away. If that makes us enemies of empires, then so be it. We are not afraid. The word spread across Earth like fire. People cheered in streets, and Thalran families wept with relief. For the first time, they felt protected not by fear but by loyalty. But the threat soon turned into action. Human freighters traveling to colonies near Mars reported strange ships blocking their paths. Cargo was seized, crews questioned for hours by Zorath patrols. Thalran traders who had just begun selling small crafts on Earth were suddenly banned from galactic markets. Other races, fearing the wrath of the empires, cut their ties with both humans and Thalran. The pressure worked. Supplies became harder to move. Trade slowed. Factories faced shortages. On the edges of Earth's colonies, fear began to rise. People whispered, had humanity made a mistake? Elder Varen felt the weight. Most of all, one night as he walked alone among the fields built for his people, a group of Thalran elders gathered around him. This alliance will destroy us, one said bitterly. The humans are kind, yes, but they are small. They cannot stand against empires that span 1,000 worlds. We must leave before we are dragged into ruin. Another elder nodded. Our survival was already fragile. To anger the Zorath is to invite death. Varen listened quietly. His heart ached. He wanted to believe in humanity, in Daniel's promise. Yet the fear in his people's voices was real. The burden pressed on his shoulders like stone. That same evening, Daniel found Varen near the river, staring into the water. They're afraid, Varen admitted, his voice heavy. Some want to leave Earth and hide, even if it means wandering the stars again. Daniel stood beside him, silent for a moment. Then he said, Do you remember the council hall, when no one would speak for you? Do you remember the laughter, the rejection? Varen nodded slowly. And do you remember the first day here when our farmers gave you bread when your children laughed again? Daniel asked. The elder closed his eyes. The memories were sharp, filled with both pain and light. If you leave now, Daniel continued softly, the galaxy will see the council was right, that you were nothing. But if you stay, if you stand with us, then you show the galaxy they were wrong. That is a risk, yes. But it is also a chance. Varen looked at him for a long time. Finally, the staff in his hand stopped shaking. His voice, though soft, carried strength. Then we stay. The decision was made. The Thalran would not run even under the shadow of the empires. Humanity had chosen them, and they chose humanity in return. But as dawn rose, the first true strike arrived. At the edge of the solar system, near a small mining station run by both humans and Thalran, a fleet of unknown ships appeared. There, hulls gleamed gold, the mark of the Zorath Empire. Without warning, they fired. Explosions lit the void. The small station cracked apart, alarms screaming through the dark. Human workers scrambled to defend, but their ships were small, unprepared. The Thalran workers cried out for help as fires spread. The first blood of the conflict had been drawn. News raced back to Earth, carried in desperate messages. Humanity's leaders gathered once more. The room was filled with tension, voices clashing, between caution and defiance. We cannot win a war with the Zorath, one official argued. And we cannot surrender without becoming slaves. Another shot back. Daniel Hayes stood at the center. His face was pale, but his voice was iron. They think we will bow because we are small, he said. They think fear will break us. But they do not understand humanity. We have always fought from weakness. We have always survived the impossible. And now, we do not fight only for ourselves. We fight for the Thalran, and for every race who was ever told they did not matter. The room fell silent. In that silence, a decision took root. Humanity would not retreat. On Earth, the Thalran prepared as best they could. They had little in the way of weapons, but they offered what they had, knowledge of energy cells, old tactics from their history, even their own lives if needed. For the first time, they were not only the protected, they were becoming partners in defense. The galaxy watched, half in disbelief, half in fear. The young species of Earth had stood against the empires. The weak Thalren, once rejected, had chosen to stay by their side. And in the distance, the Zorath fleets moved closer, their engines burning like sons of war. The tension had risen, the resistance had begun, and the storm was about to break. The destruction of the small mining station echoed across Earth like a thunderclap. Every news channel repeated the images, burning wreckage drifting in space, frantic messages cut off mid-sentence, families mourning those lost. The Zorath Empire had not just sent a warning, they had declared humanity unworthy of defiance. For many on Earth, fear gripped their hearts. But for others, that fear turned into fire. Across cities, colonies, and spaceports, volunteers stepped forward. They were not soldiers of great empires, not lords with fleets of golden ships. They were farmers, miners, engineers, and students. They were ordinary humans with stubborn hearts, and they were ready to stand. The United Earth Council gathered in a vast chamber lit by blue holograms of Earth's orbit. Maps of incoming Zorath fleets glowed above the table. Leaders argued fiercely, some pushing for retreat, others demanding open war. Daniel Hayes stood in the center, his voice cutting through the noise. "The Zorath believe we will bow because we are young," he said. "They think fear will silence us. But humanity has never been silent. We have fought through famine, plague, and war on our own world. We know what it means to struggle. And now we fight not only for ourselves, but for the Thalren, and for every voice the council tried to silence." The room grew quiet. Slowly, heads nodded. The decision was made. Humanity would resist. Factories on Earth, once built for trade and industry, turned overnight into centers of war. Old defense ships were pulled from storage and repaired. Engineers worked without rest, welding, programming, and testing weapons. Civilians delivered food, materials, and parts. The Thalren, though weak compared to mighty empires, joined with determination. Their healers prepared medicines for the wounded. Their workers taught humans how to use their small energy cells for fast repairs. Their children carried water and supplies. For the first time in their history, the Thalren stood not as beggars, but as allies. On one training ground, a young Thalren boy watched human soldiers drilling. He tugged on his elder's sleeve. "They fight even when they know they may lose," the boy whispered. The elder nodded. "That is why the galaxy fears them. And that is why we must learn from them." The first true battle came sooner than anyone expected. A Zorath fleet of sleek golden warships entered the solar system. Their ships dwarfed humanity's vessels, each one carrying weapons that could melt entire stations. They moved with the arrogance of conquerors, certain that resistance would crumble. But they found Earth waiting. Human ships, patched and old but filled with determined crews, rose from orbit. They did not match the Zorath in size or strength, but their formations were tight, their pilots ready. At their side flew a handful of Thalren craft, small, fragile, yet steady. The battle began with fire. Blazing beams crossed the void, explosions shaking the black silence. Zorath ships pushed forward like lions hunting prey. Human ships darted around them using speed and surprise. Crews worked desperately, shouting across radios, patching damage mid-fight. One freighter, converted into a gunship, took a direct hit. Its hull tore apart, but instead of retreating, its captain steered the burning vessel straight into a Zorath cruiser. The explosion rocked the field, taking both ships with it. Humanity had lost, but in loss, they showed a truth the Zorath had forgotten. Humans did not fear sacrifice. On the ground, people across Earth watched the battle broadcasts. In villages and cities, crowds stood before glowing screens, their hands clenched, their hearts pounding. They saw ordinary humans, many with little training, standing against the Golden Empire. And something spread. Pride. The Thalren too gathered, around screens. For the first time, they saw defenders fighting for them, not because of wealth or power, but because of loyalty. Tears filled their eyes as human voices shouted across the radio, "Hold the line! Don't give them an inch!" For Earth and for the Thalren, The Zorath fleet expected victory within hours. Instead, they found a wall of defiance. Every time they destroyed a human ship, another rose to take its place. Every time they thought the line would break, the humans pushed back harder. One Zorath. Commander snarled as his flagship shook under repeated attacks. "They are ants," he growled. "Why do they not scatter?" But his officers had no answer. They watched with unease as the humans fought with a fury beyond reason. In the midst of the chaos, Daniel Hayes stood aboard the command vessel Resolute Dawn. He gripped the railing as alarms screamed. Reports came of heavy losses, but also of unexpected victories. Small human ships had managed to cripple 2 Zorath cruisers, forcing them to retreat temporarily. Daniel turned to his crew. "We cannot outgun them," he said, "but we can outlast them. Show them that every star they try to take will cost them dearly. Make them question if victory is worth the price." His words spread across the comms, reaching captains and pilots. In the thick of battle, and with renewed strength they fought on. After endless hours, the Zorath finally withdrew. Their fleet, though still strong, had suffered damage they did not expect from such a young species. They left the solar system with anger burning in their golden eyes, vowing to return. When the smoke cleared, Earth mourned its dead. Many ships were gone, and thousands of lives lost. But the people did not see only loss. They saw survival. They had stood against one of the oldest empires in the galaxy and lived. In the fields of the Thalren settlement, both peoples gathered. The wounded were carried, the dead honored, and Elder Varen stepped forward, his voice breaking but proud. "Today we stood with the humans. Today we learned that strength is not measured only by fleets or weapons, but by courage. The Council called us worthless, but together we proved them wrong." Cheers rose into the air, both human and Thalren voices mixing into one. Far away, across the galaxy, the news spread. Small races whispered in wonder. If humans could stand against the Zorath, perhaps others could stand too. For the first time in centuries, the empires felt a shift, a spark of rebellion they could not fully control. On Earth, Daniel Hayes knew this was only the beginning. The Zorath would return with greater force. The Council would tighten its grip. But something had changed forever. Humanity had shown the galaxy a truth that could not be erased. They would stand, even when standing meant facing giants. And in that stand, they gave hope to every rejected voice across the stars. The first battle had ended, but Earth was far from safe. Humanity had survived the Zorath assault, yet everyone knew it was only the beginning. In the silence after the fighting, repairs began. Shipyards filled with broken vessels, families mourned. Their dead and farmers carried food to tired workers. But beneath the sorrow, something else had taken root. Pride. For the first time, humanity had stood against one of the galaxy's greatest empires and had not been crushed. And that story spread faster than light. Across the stars, small races whispered to one another. The Irkai, long bullied by the Council, spoke of humans with awe. The delicate Yari, whose voices were often silenced in meetings, began to ask if they too might find strength. Even the proud Fixari merchants, though angry at losing business, admitted in private that humanity's defiance was unlike anything they had seen. The galaxy was changing, and at its center stood Earth. On the plains, outside the Thalren settlement, Daniel Hayes walked with Elder Varen. Workers repaired ships in the distance, and children's laughter rose as Thalren and human young played together. "They grow stronger," Varen said softly, watching the children. "Not only in body, but in spirit. They are no longer afraid." Daniel nodded. "Because they know they are not alone." The elder turned to him. His pale eyes reflected the sunset. "You have given us more than food, more than medicine. You have given us a place in the stars." Daniel's face was serious. "You gave us something too, Elder. You reminded us what we stand for." But while peace touched the fields, war loomed in the dark. Scouts reported that the Zorath Empire was gathering more fleets, larger than before. They would not allow their pride to be stained by humans. This time, they meant to end Earth's resistance completely. When the news reached Earth's council, fear threatened to rise again. Maps showed impossible numbers, ships that outmatched humanity 100 to 1. Some leaders begged for surrender. Others demanded alliances that were not yet possible. But Daniel Hayes spoke once more, his voice calm and steady. They think we are still fighting alone, but we are not. The Thalren stand with us, and the galaxy is watching. If we show them that resistance is possible, others will rise. This fight is not only for Earth, it is for every world the empires have crushed. We will not surrender. His words spread far beyond the chamber. Broadcasts reached colonies, villages, and distant stations. Across the stars, small races listened, and something stirred. When the Zorath fleets finally arrived, they were met with more than humans. From hidden sectors came Irkai warbands, tired of centuries of oppression. From icy moons came Yari ships, small but swift, their captains inspired by Earth's defiance. Even a few Fixari merchants broke from their lords, sending supplies and fuel. And in the heart of it all, human ships rose again, patched, worn, but burning with determination. The battlefield lit with fire. The Zorath advanced like golden storms, their cruisers spreading destruction. But this time, humanity was not holding the line alone. Irkai fighters darted between enemy vessels, Yari ships cut through blockades, and Thalren engineers repaired damaged crafts mid-battle. Everywhere, voices shouted through the comms, for freedom, for Earth, for the rejected. The Zorath, proud and certain of their dominance, found themselves overwhelmed not by greater firepower, but by unity. They had expected to crush humans. Instead, they faced a coalition of the forgotten. The battle raged for days. Losses were heavy, but the alliance refused to break. At one crucial moment, the resolute Dawn, Daniel Hayes' flagship, faced the Zorath command cruiser. The golden vessel loomed like a fortress, weapons glowing, its commander certain of victory. Daniel stood at the bridge, his hands tight on the railing. "If we fall here, everything falls with us," he said quietly. Then louder, "All ships focus fire on the command vessel, break their pride and the fleet will scatter." The humans obeyed. The Irkai obeyed. The Yari obeyed. Together their fire converged. Shields cracked, armor burned, and finally, in a blinding explosion, the Zorath flagship was torn apart. For a heartbeat, the battlefield fell silent. Then, one by one, the golden ships turned and fled. The impossible had happened. The Zorath had been defeated. The victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For centuries, the great empires had ruled through fear, certain that no small race could resist them. But now the galaxy had witnessed the truth. United, even the weakest could stand. In the weeks that followed, delegations from dozens of small races traveled to Earth. They came not to beg, but to join. They offered trade, support, and friendship. For the first time, Earth's name was spoken with respect in council halls, not as a curiosity, but as a power. The Thalren, once ignored and rejected, stood proudly beside humans at these meetings. Elder Varen addressed the council with strong words. "You told us we had no value. You left us to die. But humanity gave us a hand, and now we live. They fought for us when no one else would, and today we stand here not as beggars, but as equals. Remember this, the galaxy will not be built on cruelty. It will be built on courage, on unity, and on hope." The chamber, once filled with scorn, now filled with silence. Even the Zorath, nursing their pride, could not deny what had happened on Earth. Life moved forward. The fields grew heavy with crops. Thalren children studied in human schools, and human families welcomed alien neighbors into their homes. Statues were built in memory of those who had fallen. Ordinary men and women who had given everything for something greater than themselves. One evening, Daniel Hayes walked alone near the river where he and Elder Varen had once spoken. The water rippled softly, stars reflecting on its surface. Varen joined him, leaning on his staff. "It is done," the elder said quietly. "We are no longer outcasts. Thanks to you, the galaxy sees us differently." Daniel shook his head. "Not thanks to me. Thanks to us. Humanity only opened the door. You chose to walk through it." Baron smiled faintly. "And now others will follow." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. For the first time, those stars did not seem cold or distant. They seemed alive with possibility. Across the galaxy, a new story began to spread. It was told in markets, in schools, in the quiet corners of forgotten worlds. It was the story of how a rejected people found hope, and how humanity, a young race with stubborn hearts, had stepped in when no one else would. And in that story, the galaxy found something it had long forgotten. The belief that even the smallest hand, when offered in kindness, could change the course of history. Humanity's place in the stars was no longer uncertain. They were not the strongest, nor the oldest, nor the richest. But they had become something more powerful than all of that. They had become the defenders of the rejected, the voice of the silenced, the hand that lifted the fallen. And for the first time, the galaxy began to dream of a future built not on fear, but on unity.